Well, welcome to this Love Lighthouse broadcast, and let's get started. It's an amazing day today, and it's so sunny. There is not a cloud in the sky that I can see at the moment. Now, see there. It's good. It's really nice. You can just see there's just not a cloud in the sky. I feel like I am in a very humble setting here when I look out. I feel, in fact, to be honest with you, I tend to go places and I always see the beauty of God wherever I go, and I think, wow, this is really amazing. Like, this is just so good. But they actually tend to be very humble places, very down to earth places, actually. When I think about even Glen Tanar, I used to be like, oh, it's so amazing. For me, the reason that it was so amazing is because of the vast space of just fields and the hills, so the scenery. And not to make gods out of them or anything, because that's part of the Bible as well, that some people can get, lost and carried away with, like, the countryside, the greenery, the fields, the blue skies, the earth, the things of the earth. So yes, it's kind of, it's just one of these things, it is very beautiful. Each of these places this is a very beautiful place in its own right, but it's very, very much, like, it reminds me, actually we're here in Scotland, but it reminds me of England's song Jerusalem. Some people actually count here as England. Do you know that? In some maps they think this is England. It's in Scotland. It reminds me of that part. It's not grammatically correct, but that's, the way that it's said in the song. And was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? They're not dark satanic mills or anything like that, but obviously these are, like, the town stuff, like old buildings. They're really beautiful. They've got a lot of character. So I kind of, I'm in my element when there's something of character. This particular building, not so much. It's very, very plain and humble, but across the way and out along, there's a wee bit more character. It looks like they could have been mills or something, some of them in the past. And so it reminds me of that part. Even though we're in Scotland, it reminds me a little bit of that part of the English song for Jerusalem. But we say it's the English song for Jerusalem, but Jerusalem is wherever we are in God, and wherever God is, it doesn't have to be linked as a set place exactly in terms of Jerusalem itself. As you know, even England have stated that's their new Jerusalem. Well, wherever Christ is the new Jerusalem. So can be our song too, and I love to sing that song as well. Speaking of which, we do obviously have the game with Scotland and England's football teams. In any case, so important today to be kind, to be thoughtful, to be mindful. It is so important, especially during these times, that there seems to be competition, like, to be thinking of those that aren't the same as you. That's what we mean by neighbour. I'm not talking about physical neighbours, like the person next door, someone sitting next to you, I don't know, waiting somewhere, maybe perhaps in a neighbouring position, in a queue somewhere or in a bus. That is not what we mean necessarily. The neighbour is, again, the person that's not necessarily like you, the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan, for example. It's not necessarily someone right next to you. It's not positional. But to think of those that might seem or appear different is very important especially on a day like today. So please be kind to each other, please be appropriate. Think, how would you like to be treated? If that were you, would you like to be treated that way? Be kind. So be kind to people that are of another, that might appear to be another race. Maybe even it might not even be that they are, it might just be that they look different. They're actually the very same. It might just be they have a different accent, but they're actually from the exact same place. Do not judge people based on these things. Seeing something that looks like someone's saying something rude, even now to Scottish players, after I've just like put out all this to like people in Scotland to be kind. But this is the thing, that you find this, you have good intentions, and then another party or another side will just completely spoil it, and then you can understand why other sides then feel like they deserve to be annoyed. But they don't, and that's important. Like, you shouldn't just be tempted because of others' bad behaviour. It's difficult, it really is. Like, I know today, like, I haven't had like any, trickiness in a long time. And I needed to get to church and I needed to go a certain way, and somebody was just so rude, and I was like, oh my god. So I know what it's like. Of course, some of this is in God and is completely founded, but it's just unfounded when it comes to like things like this, with regards to between England and Scotland and any kind of overly ridiculousness. So let me just see. Just be kind. Now, some people were saying they didn't know. They were like, talking about Black Lives Matter and why didn't people boo. I don't know what they're talking about booing about, but why didn't people boo when Scotland didn't kneel? I think they're talking about the rugby, or perhaps they're talking about the football team. I don't know. In any case, they didn't kneel, they stood. So they took a stand against racism, and everybody knows that our Scotland rugby team are very much against racism. They are welcoming of various different races. People who are in the Scotland team have links to New Zealand and England. These are some of our best players on the team, so we're very open in terms of that and very anti-racism. Everybody knows that. It's just a respectful way of doing this, in alignment as well with Christian views about these things. We only kneel to God and what is in God's will to do. So it's a very personal situation. Looking back at one of the photos now with the Scotland team, yes, I see that some of them were kneeling, some of them were standing due to their own personal calling. It's very important that when you kneel, it's kneeling for God and it's not kneeling to other gods or idolising like men or things like that. So important. But if God gave the instruction, I want you to kneel on my behalf in concern for this topic or subject or what has happened to this person, perhaps, but not out of idolatry to a problem or a person. It's never appropriate. It's actually very serious, like really extremely serious. There is grace for almost everything, but we have to put God first. We have to, yes, the second one is, love our neighbour, but we have to, in Christ, not just those that are demonic. Nope. Although you love them, but from a distance. There's a different way of doing that. Yes. Just a different kind of like level. Now, in the case of this situation, I don't know. Look, I haven't done it because I don't feel it's a calling from God to do it. But I did wonder about actually prostrating completely, flat out, never mind kneeling, for the glory of God, for God, actually, towards God, and for
God's causes, should that be the will.
I do understand why people are concerned, and I think that they should be, but there are many other ways to be concerned and to take action. And I say that coming from my father, who his name carries actually the word black for one of his names, so parts of the family, James Black Easdale Semple. So that's being said with a lot of balance, a lot of authenticity and authority. So in any case, it would have to be decided between the individual and with the individual and God, but they would have to be very careful that decision is made in God. Now, that aside, it is important that we do remember this. I'm just not sure, and I suppose the reason why it's coming up around all major, events like football to rugby to any kind of big event is because it is such a big deal and something does need to change. This is true. And, people talk about white superiority, but we also need to get a balance. And, coming from this level of authority, I can genuinely give an authoritative balance on this in terms of a viewpoint and very clearly state that it's not quite the way. In fact, I'm not really sure it actually exists. I think the reality of the matter is, more so from what I can see in truth and honesty, is that it's actually a black superiority that exists in the world. We see that in sport and fitness. Just in general, people tend to look healthier if they can, if they get a tan, if they're not pale white. We know that they're able to get vitamin D. We know they're getting fresh air and they're getting outside, and therefore they're more likely to be healthy. Now, that's not to say those sitting in or praying in the temple all the time aren't healthy in other ways. For example, I'm doing that a lot more, so you can even see, I don't know what my skin looks like to you, to be honest with you, but there's a kind of white Bible that's being opened and read all the time compared to my skin now. Now, my skin's always been quite white, but obviously I've been able to tan as you get a little bit older. You should be able to tan more even if you're born fairly white. And that's despite all our swimming pool situations and things and all the chlorine they put in that. I never thought about all those things until much later, until I realised, wow, goodness, imagine what that's doing to people's skin. Anyway, certainly not on purpose, but if you can see, that's why I look like, I don't know what that really, honestly, I don't know. I think it looks quite healthy, despite the fact I've not really been out as much as I would normally go out, as much as I would have been out when I was in Glentanner, for example. So, and before the pandemic. But in any case, I think the reality is that when it comes to health, when it comes to fitness, different sports, abilities, things like that, there's very clearly a black superiority there. And I think in boldness, confidence, character, and quite a lot of respects, ability to walk in faith tends to be quite a big one, quite a big superior ability in doing that in these cultures, which is not so much in the cultures that would be typically linked with those who are white. And again, why are they pale? Why are they white? Pretty much because they're going to be in the temple all the time. It's just the difference in probably the difference in what they're called to at the time, their role. It's not necessarily just about grace, but sometimes it can be. Someone's carrying more grace, they might be able to be more free-flowing and out and about. Not always though. Sometimes, as I said, there's a unique calling to be indoors, and that's perhaps why people's skin may be a certain tone Not always again, sometimes people are born and with the colouring that they're at, and that is just it, and it's, you know, the melanin that's run along throughout their history and their generations and their ancestors quite seamlessly. But, you know, this is why you just can't look at just how someone looks alone, or just, you know, what their voice might sound like, where they sound like they come from, where they say they come from, what scarf they're wearing today, what team they say that they're supporting today, or what side they seem to be on. We need to look beyond all of these things. We need to we do need to address this situation. That one thing before I started off this today was about, you know, that about remembering the poor, or remembering people that, even although they would seem to have some sort of superiority, have fallen into a poor situation, or something that is not quite right, like, you know, the person that people are talking about taking a knee for, and that kind of thing. Well, we do have to remember that there are people out there who, just because of the name or the colour of their skin, although they are the true leader, they're the one that's the real sovereign, they're the one that's the real chosen by God, because they don't look or match up to what society think. Then they make a choice of someone else, even though that's a very bad choice. They may do that. So we do need to look upon those that really are chosen by God, but, you know, that the world would persecute, and we need to stand up for them. This is true, but there are appropriate ways of doing that. It's how that's actually done, and making sure that it is respectful, it is reverent. And that instead of poor choices being made, good choices are being made by the actual character. And even although, because someone's carrying Christ, that may challenge you, not choosing someone that's just going to be whipped with money or gifts or things or whatever, but actually be ruled properly by the one that comes in the name of the Lord, and do the appropriate and right thing by God. So you know, it reminds me of this point that I've been brought to in Daniel, where you know, he has God that we worship, but, you know, this other king, Belshazzar, has people just stopping what they're doing and kneeling down, falling to the ground and worshipping at certain times. And of course Daniel is not going to do that, because he's not an idol worshipper, and so he stands his ground. But therefore it makes a difficulty with those round about, and they're like, well, why is he not worshipping all these worldly things? Why is he not worshipping this kind of idea, this, you know, golden calf sort of idea that, you know, all the other people are being made to worship? And that's what this kind of reminds us of this time, that although we have to remember our other people, and we do have to stand up for them, we have to do it in a reverent way. we also have to be able to therefore stand not in a prideful manner, but in a way that's putting God first and do what we're supposed to do. That aside, let's just see what the will of God is on everything. I think a decision will be made. Now, I'm going to see. Yeah, it is. It is true. There will be a lot of comeuppance. There's going to be a lot done, in terms of, I suppose, backlash towards those that have unfairly persecuted people through their own jealousy or whatever it may be, because someone's black. It doesn't make sense. But again, this happened to Jesus. Jesus was persecuted because people were jealous. So, and he would be black as well, obviously. So let's have a look. Yeah, but it's really important to consider how we go about standing up for that. Against that, rather, and standing up for justice. The first would be to put God first, to go to God, to make sure you're in prayer to God and having that constant relationship there. Seeing beyond the supposed situations, beyond the supposed colours, beyond the supposed creeds, beyond all the supposed labels, and in putting God first. I think that would be the one way to deal with it best. Well, the answer is very simple then. As it always is. Very simple answer.